Okay, so we are here for some collegiate power rankings. Time for the update, and a few meaningful things have happened since then. We're looking at all of collegiate Overwatch, of course, but the big things that have really happened since then, a little bit more NACE, some more NECC. We mostly look at Division 1, a little bit at Division 2 as we can pop into here. There's a couple relevant teams in there. And then, of course, we have the last few rounds of Homecoming, which we have our bracket, which we'll be talking about. And then we have what happened in the last four rounds, I guess, since we've last updated here as well. So let's start by getting right into this. Why have things moved? What's big? What's different, etc. Well, the first thing that's probably going to jump out at people is Northwood is down here. They've fallen out of the sort of tier up here where they were before. They were in this spot, but they did lose to Fisher's main team, and Fisher's main team in previous seasons would have been like a lock in for this tier, maybe the very end of this tier, and the occasional upset from them, nothing to worry about. Roster strength hasn't looked crazy this season. That said, they have a win over Northwood, but Northwood has looked not great in their other matches. They devolved into a clown fiesta versus ISU and lost that 3-0. They haven't won their other good matches. They sure got a win over Rutgers, but it was an absolute nail biter earlier. So they don't look like they belong in like a cut above the scene anymore, which is sort of what these tiers tend to be. But I'm actually going to be careful about that because I've relabeled this upper core, and upper core can be threatened by the mid-core, core collegiate, whatever. What we're mostly looking at when we're looking at these power rankings, when we're thinking about this stuff, tends to be upper core to lower core, the stuff that's above the mess, that defends itself pretty reasonably, that doesn't have very many upsets to teams lower than this line. But we're mostly not that focused on the top, or sometimes it's top two, but the second is still higher than the core, because those teams tend to just not drop to the core. So we're usually looking at about 12, 14 teams, something like that, that sort of make up what we would call core collegiate Overwatch. Those would be very good tier 3 teams, okay tier 2 teams, that sort of thing. That's usually what we are looking at here. And right now, it kind of looks like ISU is the only team that is above the fray. Some of you might be going, hey, I've seen Winthrop's roster. Winthrop's roster looks untouchable. They look like they haven't really figured it out. You can see it in scrims that have been streamed and have been called. You can see it in their high overlap with Shock. You can see the clip that went around of like, okay, we're just going to keep rotating players until we get a map win, and that's our new team. That's what we're going with. That was a funny one to watch. Winthrop obviously still has crazy good players, but this meta that maybe ended with today's patch, even though Winthrop has done what they're supposed to and won their matches, it just doesn't look like that sort of champion team, at least till this point in the season. Maryville did lose, is behind Winthrop here, but they do seem to still belong in this tier, whereas Northwood has fallen. So again, the big move here, probably Northwood demotion, slight demotion for Winthrop as well. Even though Winthrop didn't lose matches to get there, they haven't looked clean enough to really look like, oh, hey, there's a tight 1-2, it's a 1, and then a 2-3 sort of situation. How did we move lower on the pit? I don't know which team you're with. They look really sloppy and uninterested. I won't lie. Northwood, Winthrop. I think Northwood probably looks a bit uninterested. I think Winthrop maybe cares but can't figure it out. But I think a lot of teams can't figure this out right now. Like this last meta that we were in is very upset heavy. That tends to happen with brawl metas because you can't just go, hey, we have the 5 best mechanical players, so if we just put them together and don't have them scrim, they'll just win, is not the case. And I think we haven't really had even though we've had brawlier metas in Overwatch 2, I don't think we've had too much in terms of this meta was like deceptively a brawl meta. It seems like, oh, well, you've got pick-off potential with your Asher Widow. You've got a Genji. You've got a Rissa Javelin. Like, oh, it's going to be about the pick-offs. Nah, it's a lot less pick-offy than the previous Orisa meta. It's really been more of a brawl meta, and brawl metas tend to be, hey, does the team sort of understand what it needs to do, how the meta works, the ult trades, how to drive those ults? Brawl metas get very meta specific in a way other metas tend to get a little bit more, hey, be good at Overwatch sort of stuff. Which isn't to say be good at Overwatch doesn't help in a brawl meta, but that's part of why we've seen as many upsets as we have here. And usually in brawl metas, teams figure out that it's sort of like, oh, it's a brawl meta and it's about the cooldown cycling. It's about understanding the ult trades a little faster than I think many teams did this time. So yeah, we're looking at some of that. I think that's why these guys can't stick it. I think that's part of why Northwood looks bad, even with great players. I would certainly accredit that to some of, Northeasterns. We've had Siena Heights, go, hey, those players should be better than able to take the loss they did. Similar stuff with Mizzou. We've seen a lot of messy upsets throughout here where Santa Cruz beats UTD, but then loses to Bronco Blacks, and Bronco Blacks is nowhere, and all this sort of messiness has sort of been part of this meta. But we'll continue through here, and hey, maybe this patch just changed things. Maybe Orisa and Juno are dead. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. Juno's not dead. But hey, maybe. So anyway, that's this tier. Nothing really, really exciting in terms of matches between these guys. Winthrop did, confirm, hey, they're the number 2 team, but they look a bit more like the number 2 team, not a realistic challenge for 1. UCI, nothing really interesting happened. Fisher moved up quite a bit with their win over Northwood. Bryant Stratton definitely belongs in this tier, and you might think, wait, they had a close loss not that long ago versus Fisher, and Fisher beat Northwood, so should they be higher up? Rutgers had a super close loss versus Northwood, and ASU beat Rutgers. So that's why we've got the order that we do here. I don't think there's any crazy here. I think this is, a zone where good Overwatch lives. We're pretty happy with this. And I think we're still in good Overwatch down here as well with some things. So then we have St. Clair. St. Clair did lose a close match versus Bryant Stratton. That would have been what I expected to happen. I would have expected that match to be close, and I would have expected that match to go Bryant Stratton's way. And it did. We then have Bellevue, who are here. They've done well. They sort of reasserted themselves after the one loss they had to put themselves back at the top end of this lower tier. Fine. Bellevue, I think they might have even finished. Did they even finish 9-1? I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but okay, I guess we're doing a refresh to try to get that back. And can I have my standings? Anyway, they finished 9-1 or 8-2. They very strong. We look at that. We know Bellevue did, in fact, get a 9-1 finish. And that's not, you might be going, they're 9-1. Why are they not higher? You're going to find there's a fair number of unproven 8-2s. And then Bellevue, I'd probably look at Bellevue in particular and say, thank you, wonderful tournament page. That is not what I clicked. Okay, hopefully those will load while we're at it. Almost like I prep these things, but, that's not going to work this time. Okay, so Bellevue, fine. They got sort of the win to reestablish themselves. You might be looking at it and thinking, wait, ABC's the main thing. They're 9-1. Surely they belong higher than sort of the top end of lower core there. And if this website worked at all, you would see what I was going for here. And you can quickly see went over Texas A&M, went over Fisher White, went over UCF, lost to Converse. That's what dropped them sort of down more heavily in the last place. There's not actually any good wins here. That's not regular ASU. I think that's ASU's third team. It's not their first. I don't think it's their second either. So there's not actually any good wins in here. That's not regular Northwood. That's Northwood's second team. There's just nothing in here. They had a little bit of an easy run. That said, I'm not too worried about them. They have proving wins. They just got them over in NACE, which we are perfectly fine with. We can go back to round 6. I think it was round 6 that they had a meaningful one to reestablish themselves in. And I could have sworn they did. As soon as I called them out, they a day later got one, and now I'm losing track of it. Oh, well. Oh, what put them in danger was this loss over here to this loss over here to ISU. But anyway, they've done what they need to reestablish that. Converse, unfortunately, did forfeit out their last two matches. Hopefully that's over. Hopefully they're good to play and happy now. They didn't compete in their last two matches. They took forfeits for that. That did mess up the seeding a little bit, and there's a couple things that have really messed up the seeding. Not to the degree that we had in the final season of Owl, where we had like a fifth of the top end teams couldn't play one weekend because they had players watching the Owl finals for the final season of Owl. It didn't mess things up that bad, but between a hurricane and Converse doing forfeits in the end, and Fisher doing two forfeits early in the bracket, and some of these teams that we've mentioned having weird losses, Cleary taking a win off Siena. Oh, no, that wasn't in this. Some weird things like that. It's been a bit of an interesting one. Anyway, Converse, as long as they're actually playing, as long as they're good, this is where they belong. They have some good wins, but ultimately St. Clair did get a reestablishing win against them. They've been part of the mess. We went over that a lot in the last video. Blinn has a couple things that we're happy with. We saw Blinn get a win over Bellevue earlier. We saw Blinn get a win over Mizzou earlier. We're okay with what Blinn has accomplished. Blinn is solidly in this lower core tier. And then things start to get questioning. I'm okay with Blinn. Blinn's got multiple wins over teams that we would have previously considered lower core, including a win over here, and Bellevue's in no danger of falling out, at least by my read. Then we get to Illinois Orange. And Illinois Orange should be a great team. Illinois Orange has a history for a couple of years of being a great team. They've got Zoolander over there. They've got Chopper over there. Known good players. They don't really scrim as a team much, though they did a little this last week. But they have this thing going on where last season they basically had three matches against Rutgers, then lost them. They got into playoffs, and then they had to play with a roster that had rearrangements, people missing, and lost to, I believe it was lost to UTD. Maybe they beat UTD. I forget. Super close match, but I don't care because that UTD was struggling. Illinois had players in all sorts of messy spots. And then we can look at this and say, oh, well, surely if they managed to get an okay record, get into playoffs, they must have been able to win a good match against one of the teams up here, right? No, they didn't, unfortunately, and then they took a loss to CSULB. CSULB isn't like a nothing team, and if they'd taken that loss, honestly, to CSULB, they for sure would have been demoted out of this tier, but they had major ping issues. You can see the screenshots, disconnects, etc. Okay, fine. Bad ping, can't really get your players in the lobby, terrible. That's a reasonable reason for a loss. But the problem is we haven't seen a win against a core collegiate team from Illinois Orange all of this season, and I don't think we saw it all of last season either. Maybe there was something in their group last season, but if they did something in their group, it was like beating up on a Blinn or something that, didn't have one of their starters, or beating up on a St. Thomas that didn't have a starter. Not something that I'm really going to count. So I am desperate to see what Illinois can actually do against a core team. We're not going to get it in that first round, but they would be in danger of falling out of this tier. Why am I making such a big deal out of falling out of this tier? Because some of you are going to notice Mizzou is not in this tier anymore. Why is Mizzou not in this tier anymore? Well, Mizzou lost to Siena Heights. Well, okay, that's weird. Siena Heights was able to reverse sweep Mizzou. Well, if that's the case, why is Siena Heights not higher? What's going on here? Well, couple things. One thing, you sort of need, in some ways, multiple to do it. You move closer off the first, but if you don't have any other proving wins, it's hard to be like, oh, we're going to put you ahead of this versus was this a bad day versus the meta sort of janky, etc. No. Fisher Navy also beat Mizzou. And that's a problem, potentially. You could go, okay, well, if Fisher Navy beat Mizzou, why is Fisher Navy all the way back here? Fisher Navy 3-4 weeks ago lost to Terps. Well, maybe Terps should be better. I've thought for a while that maybe my read on Terps is wrong, and they should actually be up here in like the top 18 or so. They're not in this actual core collegiate, but in top 20, but not in core collegiate. That space exists. It's actually bigger now. I've thought that for a while, but the problem is if we go look, and we'll go look at where these happen, we can go right over to NECC here, and we're going to see, okay, so Fisher Navy got 3-1 by Terps over here in week 2 of NECC. Okay, fine. And then we're going to go further and say, okay, well, maybe Terps are just really good. Maybe that makes sense, but then we can see Terps lost 3-0 to Mizzou, but then we've got Fisher Navy 3-1ing Mizzou. Now, I'm sure Mizzou was tilted after losing to Siena Heights, and they would have had to play this, it looks like the next day, maybe 2 days later, so maybe they hadn't figured things out yet, but that's 2 losses for Mizzou to teams that have not established that they belong at that higher level. And we can also go further if we want with Terps and say, okay, well, you're holding a loss to Mizzou against Terps. That's not really fair. Mizzou's probably still a pretty good team, even if they're maybe not in this core collegiate, or maybe fell out of this core collegiate. Maybe they shouldn't have fallen out of this core collegiate and it's a little bit of a stumble. But you're also going to find Terps have a loss to Texas A&M. And Texas A&M, maybe they're better, but Texas A&M don't have any proving wins. Texas A&M don't have any proving wins. They just don't. Their best win is over Terps. And at this point, we go a little bit into, okay, where have Terps been before? Where's Texas A&M been before? What else has Fisher Navy done? Well, Fisher Navy's other win is going to be over like a Briarcliff, and Briarcliff also lost to Fisher White. So if you're losing to Fisher Navy and Fisher White is worse than Fisher Navy, we're sort of in a territory of this is a mess. So this gets funky off of Mizzou taking 2 losses, but then to make things even worse, Siena Heights, then after beating Mizzou, dropped to Ball State. We're just in crazy land here. Upset heavy, whatever we want to call it. And you can say, hey, that's not an upset. Ball State has been around top 20, bottom of top 20 before. Siena Heights is a new player on the block that don't have any proving wins, except that Mizzou that they just got. And then right after that, lost to Ball State. Well, what else has Ball State done here? They lost to UTD and Fisher White. Well, Fisher White is again that 3rd Fisher team, not even that 2nd Fisher team there. And they lost to UTD. And if we want to talk about UTD, they lost to Santa Cruz and Cumberland. Losing to Cumberland is fine over here, but Santa Cruz is down here. Well, should Santa Cruz be higher? Well, Santa Cruz beat UTD in Pittsburgh, but they lost to Bronco Black. And Bronco Black lost to Grandview and Terps. It's a mess. It's beautiful. That's part of why this is the pit. But you can see, if we're seeing, hey, Mizzou struggling with multiple losses here, Siena Heights immediately losing it to Ball there, and earlier in the season they lost to Cleary. That's why this is the pit, because these guys are not able to sort of cleanly do what they're supposed to do. The only teams above the pit that I think have losses to teams in the pit are going to be... Is it just Converse right now? No, in Converse in Illinois. And Illinois has the internet craziness excuse, whatever, that will grant them for now, but they're in danger because it's been a long time since we've seen that team, even if it is the same core, actually win a core collegiate match. They've just, run into Rutgers repeatedly and then forfeit over a hurricane or have, people not available, etc. So this is in danger of falling, but you'll see this isn't a top 20 right now. This isn't even a top 16 or a top 18 like it's been for a while. We're down to a top 14 that's in real close danger of becoming a top 13, as far as I'm concerned, because these teams just haven't promoted. And Cumberland is firmly the rear guard right here. Cumberland beat Georgia Tech earlier in the season, beat Utah, beat Miami, Ohio, Cumberland has pretty firmly established themselves as the rear guard, but they don't actually have any wins in this core, and the core does require the ability to trade with other teams within the core. Cumberland can sit as king of the pit, fantastic, until Cumberland actually gets a win over a Bellevue and gets a win over Irvine. They took a map there, if memory serves. I think they took a map off St. Clair as well. Any of these would do it. Any of these would be ready to promote Cumberland, but that's about where things are right now. So, Core Collegiate, the big change was Northwood is down in here. Fisher moved up from the back of this tier to the front. We've established the correct order for ASU versus Rutgers. Brant Stratton may feel a little bit cheated back here, but again, they played close versus Fisher, but they played close versus Fisher, but Fisher beat Northwood. Rutgers played close versus Northwood, and ASU beat Rutgers. So this is where we are. We talked a ton about this tier last time, and it hasn't really changed other than St. Clair getting their reestablishing win right after that one ended. One moment. We need a group below pit. We do. Maybe we need the depths of hell that are below the pit or something. And it's entirely possible, but honestly, the pit is messy enough by itself that it's hard to say, oh, Santa Cruz would 100% defend themselves from people in a lower tier. Would they? Would they? Ball will 100% defend themselves against IWU. I'm not sure I believe you at all. Because the pit is messy. Do I think somewhere there's a cutoff in the pit here? I just don't know where exactly it is. Maybe it's here. Maybe it's here. Maybe it's here. Maybe it's here. Like there's a cutoff somewhere, yeah, where maybe there should be a tier break here, but it's not a clean tier break. You'll remember there's 2 losses in the core, in the lower core to someone actually in the pit, and there'd be a lot more of that trading up back and forth if we split the pit. So that's kind of where we are. So that's basically how we got to the point at which we are. I could go through these teams, but I've sort of established this in talking about the Mizzou shenanigans. Cumberland's defended themselves and is in that rear guard position of the core, but not quite in it. Mizzou, we of course talked about. Mizzou does have the one win. That's the other one. Converse has a loss to Northeastern, who's down here, and Blinn has a loss to Mizzou, who's down here. So those are the, and then Illinois Orange has the DC one. But that's only 3, and hard to really count that. This was at LAN. Maybe people were tired, etc. We should probably put more weight on LAN, not less. But that's not maybe the right thing to do, given the overwhelming majority of collegiate games are played not on LAN. This, Converse was between hurricanes. Like, what do you want to do here, right? Like, this line is a pretty good line, but we have seen Northeastern's not up here anymore. Mizzou's not up here anymore. Siena Heights, we probably would have expected to be up here somewhere, but hey, if you have losses to Cleary, who, would be who's a very highly volatile team, but you have losses to Cleary and to Ball, that's going to be tough to do. And you could say, well, you're being too hard on Ball. I'm not being too hard on Ball. If we actually want to look at Ball, like, yes, Ball could be peaking, and Ball has come up pretty heavily in the pit in terms of where they've climbed from, but they have losses to, again, UTD and Fisher White. So this just becomes crazy funness, and it's great. Hey Kyle, how you doing? By the way, committee members, I am in voice and Discord if you want to hop on. You don't have to hop on at all. You can be in chat. You're doing other things. I get it, but that happens. Kings of the Pit. There you go, Naughty. Wanted to fix. We lost to Mizzou at LAN Atlanta and lost to Bellevue early on. We recently beat Converse and St. Clair. Yep. You guys are firmly in here. You guys beat Converse. You beat St. Clair. I'm good with it. You belong in the core. We're solid. You guys lost to Mizzou at LAN. I am totally aware. And then the other loss you had was and then to Bellevue. And Bellevue's just a good team. I mean, they're still in the lower core here because they haven't proven that they can do anything up here, but Bellevue for a moment was king of lower core, and then St. Clair reestablished themselves. And St. Clair could make an argument to be up here, but they don't have any wins up here. They played close versus Bryant Stratton, but last season St. Clair would have been up in this tier. Last season St. Clair did get 6th in the playoff bracket, but this season St. Clair, they lost Tread, who was probably their best player. Bryant Stratton just beat them. Bryant Stratton is clearly, this is the right spot for them. We went over Y and Core Collegiate, so we're going to have St. Clair down here in the next tier. And we filled out a lot of why the pit looks like this. I know some people had Briarcliff pretty high on their rankings early on. I think some of that was expectations that they would have Mari, and then people didn't properly correct that because Briarcliff has sort of hung on with some 19th and 20th place votes that probably didn't really fit. Don't get me wrong, they're in the pit, and you might go, oh, they should be like top 25. Over who? Over who? That's not me knocking Briarcliff. I'm not calling out Briarcliff in particular, but they did take over the last 2 weekends losses to Fisher 2 and Fisher 3. That's Navy and White, which hasn't been great for them. I expect they will firmly be up in here, maybe even up in here next semester if they get to play with the roster that they like. But that's why I have them down here, which will surprise some people. UCSD might be back to making trouble for people. UCSD, for people who have been in collegiate longer, has historically been a team that'll go get a win that they wouldn't be expected to, but then will lose to like a team that's like the 32nd best team or something. I don't think they're going to hit those same highs again. I think their players are a little too, hey, it's time to graduate. Hey, they're just not quite as hungry anymore. Hey, the scene is more competitive than it used to be. Teams are better than they used to be. But we'll see. Nice to see Santa Cruz doing things, making some moves again, but not clean if they've got the loss to Broncos there. So this sort of just gets fun. Miami, Ohio, of course, had a heartbreaker. They lost to Northeastern in the final round of Swiss. In doing so, they missed top 64. They don't deserve to have missed top 64, but they had they had four very difficult opponents between Northeastern, Utah, Bellevue, and someone else who is firmly in here. They just had a really tough time that they were looking at there. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to something else here that's still in the collegiate scene, because this is the power rankings that I've got. I guess I'll take a quick look to see if people are yelling at me in chat, and then we'll move on to talking about, we sort of talked about the key matches that happened, but we'll look at I think the things that I want to do is I want to go over sort of the unproven 8-2s. There's only one unproven 9-1. I think Brian Stratton earns their 9-1, even though you wouldn't have expected them to be 9-1. I think Bellevue probably isn't actually a good enough team to be 9-1, but we had almost a record number of teams here. I know there's not 447 at the end, but 447 teams that registered initially, that's a very big thing. Usually top 64 is usually group stages, and that usually has gotten us a few 6-4 teams. No 6-4 teams this time. Everyone in top 64 had to be at least 7-3, and a few 7-3s missed out. But where we have a bigger room for some unprovenness is in our 8-2 teams. And we will be going through that. We'll also go over bracket predictions, but let's catch up with chat now. We were talking about that, and that makes sense. Haven't lost to the pit yet, but we haven't beat anyone above. Yeah, and that's happened before. We've seen a Fisher team in a previous season be that. We saw Iowa, back when they had Zeb and Z-Man there, be sort of that rear guard before. Northeastern might have done a semester as the rear guard. So it's definitely a role. It's a thing. It puts you in a good position to strike up, but you just got to keep defending, pushing off the challengers until you can find your way through. And you guys have, you guys have taken some maps of St. Clair and Irvine, I believe. You guys are clearly looking for it, ready for it. It's just making sure you can find the good scrims to continue to reach that next rung on the ladder there for you. Okay. Why put Utah over Siena Heights University when Siena Heights University just beat them? Did they? Oh, you're right. They did beat them. I'll explain exactly why. Because Ball State. What happens when teams win and lose to each other is it pulls them in each other's direction. I could just go, oh, well, now Ball beat Siena Heights, so they should be right ahead of Siena Heights. I could do that, except do you want me to then also go ahead and put, as I look at their losses here, do you want me to also go ahead and put UTD and Fisher White ahead of Siena Heights? I can put Utah behind Siena Heights, but do you want me to put Fisher White ahead of Siena Heights, Fisher's third team? Is that real? You see how this sort of works, where because we're in the pit where everything is messy, that's kind of where we are. You're right, because Siena Heights has a win over Utah there. I should flip those two specifically because that's a recent win. But that is why you get these weird things where it's like, wait, but they have a win over them. Okay, but what do you want to do about this loss to a team that's 10 spots back? And the longer ago time frame wise that loss was, perhaps the less it matters. And the win was over the weekend. The losses were 2 weeks back in some cases, but 2 weeks isn't that far away timeline wise. Well, for once, Temporal isn't getting screamed at by the community for his rankings. That's because these rankings. It's crazy right now. I have my team slightly higher, but I understand where Temporal has us. Of course, Kyle. Everyone's gonna have their team slightly higher in their mind, and I totally get it. I could easily see you guys being 2 spots up. I could easily see. I think Irvine is pretty unproven in this spot. For example, I have them here because I had them here early, and nothing's happened that has moved them. Um, Irvine could be quite a bit lower in some ways, but and you can have a little bit of. I actually think this is a pretty locked in order. This is just right. This is just right. Maybe Irvine could land somewhere in here, but this order is correct for these guys. This order is correct for these three. These three are clearly ahead of these guys. This one used to be sort of, we called it a circle of trades or whatever because Converse had a lot of messy trades. Mizzou and Blinn had that, where like Mizzou had wins up, but Blinn had the loss to Mizzou. Like this is, it's messy. It's messy. Okay, but I'm catching up on Tamu. I've got Tamu. Tamu's right down here, man. You're right over Terps. You got the recent win over Terps. Good on you. And Terps has some good wins, so that's good. But it's crazy. Temporal do presidential rankings next. Ooh, there's an idea. Begging to see UCI play in CEC West to actually play decent teams just to not even register. I know. They have before, and that's been good, but UCI has traditionally been the collegiate team. UCI and St. Thomas have traditionally been the good collegiate teams that like only play in ABC or play in ABC and like a minimal number of other things. No NACE, no NECC, and it's been like no, off tournament here, off tournament there, maybe CCC quals, and no CCC quals for Irvine this time. And St. Thomas isn't in that good team list anymore, but that's just how it is. But UCI is playing in Master Division, and I think that's good. It's unfortunate that we don't get to see UCI establish itself against the collegiate teams as much, but especially since Maryville isn't playing as a team in Master Division or in OWCS anymore, I think it's important to have a pretty good college, even if we don't know exactly where it sits, that is competing against the tier 2 teams or that is sort of sitting visible, giving some of that like collegiate versus non-collegiate cross barometer clout measuring sticks, whatever that we have there. Someone was asking why Converse Gold over ISU Academy. Converse Gold over ISU Academy because ISU Academy has worse losses. ISU Academy, if ISU Academy has actually figured out what their DPS line is and actually can play at the level that they did when they beat Northeastern consistently, fantastic. But I have seen very little evidence of that based on their losses. Their losses are worse than Converse Gold's losses. Converse Gold, I think, has a forfeit in Division 2 in NECC, but ISU Academy has their loss to Briarcliff. They have a loss to either Fisher 2 or 3 in ABC. ISU Academy has worse losses than Converse Gold, is the answer. And if I was convinced firmly that they had fixed those, they'd found the right lineup, they were doing it, I'd probably be comfortable bumping them up a couple spots, maybe 3, 4, 5 spots. But I'm not convinced that ISU Academy knows what ISU Academy needs to do to win. Is there an entry cost for the CC quals? I don't remember. I don't think CC quals had an entry cost, but don't quote me on that. They played it last year, lost it. Well, right, and they had both Irvine's in it last year. We had UCI and UCI going on. Uh, we three are Converse Gold. Oh, Converse Gold is in Nace. I didn't realize they were in Nace. I don't know who you are, Chombo. Let me scroll up here. Did Chombo identify themselves earlier? Uh, uh, Chombo, you got to tell me what team you're with. I mean, I can go check, but Chombo is ISU Academy. Okay, cool, cool. You want to explain some of your losses to me? I mean, it sucks, but losses are ankle weights on you. You guys have the loss to Briarcliff. You guys have the loss to the Fisher team there. Converse Gold, I'll go check Nace because if Nace does have. Oh, I have to go see now. I didn't realize Converse his second team was in Nace here. I knew they were in CECC. Because again, we're actually lower than these rankings are mostly aimed. We get into the pit because we have to, but again, I'm not kidding when I say Core Collegiate really is here, and then we want to have an eye on potential threats. Potential, hey, they could mix it up, hey, they're next one up, hey, these are the ones you keep an eye on to go do stuff. By the time we get down into some of this, we're sort of in, okay, what are we doing territory? Did you guys, what do you have here? Converse Purple is your main roster in this, and you guys should be what, East? Condors, that's not Converse. I'm gonna have to see it. North Texas. Yeah, I'm not immediately seeing it. My eyes are probably just going right over it, but that's that's the answer to your question. If Converse has bad losses, pulling them down too, I can move them, but I cannot quickly see that right now, so that's not going to work because this up here is the Super Conference and purple is the main team. Oh, are they not? Well, this is Varsity Premier. Which one are they in? Fisher Navy beat ISU Acad. Okay, right. That would do it too. And there we go. ISU Acad's main support. We dropped out of Nace, but did at least play this. Oh, okay. Okay, so I'd have to go early to early rounds of Nace to find it. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm doing that right now. Okay, we can leave this up while I do that. It would be Varsity Plus. I'm not going to go find that. You can only have one team per school in Varsity Premier. Right, that would do it. Okay. At least Alvernia get in the pit. At least I'll let Alvernia get in the pit, dog. Is Alvernia actually threatening? I mean, do you have 3 wins over pit teams? Do you have 2 wins over pit teams? Like, I remember playing you guys. I've seen you get maps off some pit teams. Have you beat multiple pit teams? But the real thing is, Alvernia is not in a place where I'm going, oh yeah, they're a threat to the core. They could maybe be the next one up to do a chip on the core. Really, our pit is bigger than it needs to be. And the reason our pit is bigger than it needs to be is because, yeah, we do have interest. We do care some of what's going on here. But could I go and put more teams in here? Could I go put SCAD back in here? Yes. Could I go put UCLA and Cal back in here? I suppose. I'm not actually convinced Cal would go any higher than like maybe here, but Cal, does Cal want to be relevant again? Okay, if Cal wants to be relevant again and is playing serious again, maybe they find their way to here, sort of thing. But we're sort of getting pretty deep into it at that point. I will say our match against Navy and you guys were before we figured out our tank and DPS rotation. Okay. Uh, every team's always figuring stuff out. I mean, obviously, Chombo, I'm going to tell you that if we played again, we've figured more stuff out then and that wouldn't happen. But hey, it happened. You get the win, you get the ranking results. You get the ranking results. And you might be going, well, why are we not up here? Why are we not further ahead of Converse Gold? And if you beat Converse Gold and Converse Gold has other bad losses, sure, I'm happy to move you guys up. But again, you guys have losses and losses are ankle weights. Again, I can look at this and say, hey, Northeastern has a win over Converse this semester, so for that reason, Northeastern deserves to stay up in this tier. But they don't. They took too many losses, and so did you guys. And same thing's happening to Siena Heights. Siena Heights, by all rights, roster quality should be up here. But nope, that's a couple losses that aren't going to let them be up here, and no wins up here to prove it. Or Mizzou, hey, Mizzou has a win up here, so they deserve to be up here. Well, no, because they took multiple losses down here. You can't do it. Okay. Lulu. Lulu is the scrimbinder manager, whatever, for Boise. Yes. Boise is not competing in anything that I care about. I know Boise is competing in something in collegiate, and I know Boise scrims, so you might scrim them and go, oh, hey, I have a pretty good idea of where they sit. I don't care. They're not competing in ABC. They're not competing in NECC. They're not competing in NACE. You're not a team at that point. I suppose maybe if they had CCC results, I'd do it, but if you're not in any of the four biggest things, I can't be bothered to care, even if you're great. I think they're probably trying to figure out how to properly rebuild that roster, Natalia. They're in CCC. Okay. If they get a win in CCC groups that I care about, maybe I'll care. But the problem is, if I put them somewhere, they're then never going to be able to move because the only, like, is the scene getting better than them? Is the scene getting worse than them? You know, like, how are they? If I place them based off of just CCC quals, unless they actually make it through to CCC, we're just never going to have more data. So I don't think they're worth posting. Can't type a team that plays in nothing. Exactly. Doug, I don't care. It's collegiate rankings. Hey, Woods. Should have beat Georgia Tech. I I can feel the same way. You know, I can feel like we should have beat Fisher A. That's not what the scoreline says at the end. What are you gonna do? Oh, we were, a team fight away on both maps. Blah blah blah. Yeah, but they got the win. Oh well. Okay. Let me scroll back up here, and then we'll get into the next section because I can get lost in comments forever. I know. You'd be shocked if BCU stays top 20 this week. I don't think they will. If they're not, if they do, too many people on the committee aren't paying enough attention, and that will need its own way of being addressed. Uh-huh. Natalia, UNT. I think the only reason you're lower in the pit, I don't think you are lower in the pit. I mean, there may be teams that moved ahead of you, but that happens. Like, if you don't pick up quality wins and other teams do pick up quality wins, you can fall even though you're not losing, right? Now, the way to really avoid that is go beat Bryant Stratton, go beat St. Clair, go beat St. Clair and Converse. Okay, then these teams aren't going to beat you unless they start getting massive, meaningful wins, etc. But if we look at what you guys did, North Texas here, because I've had an eye on you when you guys put down St. Thomas. That was okay. Gotta pay some attention to you. Turns out St. Thomas is fake, but I'm looking for always, hey, who's the next person up? Are you guys threatening? And I don't think I've seen anything. We've gotten to the end of regular season for NACE and North Texas. That's a forfeit win that you guys got in week 7. And if we go back to week 6, we're going to see North Texas. That was the win over UST, which I had factored in last time. And then if we go to ABC, I guess I can probably quickly pull up North Texas. I'm going to find a win over some quality teams here, right? Right? Some quality team wins here. Win over Drexel. Okay. Lost to Grandview. Lost to Grandview is going to hurt you. Grandview, hey, Grandview has some good players. They have some known players, but they also have rounding out that roster some not so known players. They're not the rear guard team of the rear guard. They've been rear guard of the core before. They're not that team this semester. Lost to CSULB Gold. Well, CSULB Gold is an 8-2 team that beat Illinois Orange, but the Illinois Orange win gets an asterisk, and that 8-2 gets an asterisk as well because of it. That's not doing it. Bellevue loss not held against you in the slightest, but that's why you're not higher. It's a massive pain for me too when I was updating the results sheet. Uh-huh. Okay, I can close out. That's Bellevue. We don't need. Oh, Bellevue. We were looking at earlier. Oh, Bellevue. So what I was pivoting over to here, Penn State beat GVU and Breyer, along with close losses to BSC. Okay, I'm aware of Penn State. Penn State, it's Paz's team. I don't know if Paz is still there. Penn State, like 3 years ago, when I first got into this scene, 4 years ago, whenever that was, would have been the would have been like a top 16, maybe a top 13 team. But they've done basically nothing since that first semester I got in or second semester I got in. So I'm ready to see it. I'm ready to see it. Okay. Okay. So less reading chat now because I think I've got there. Uh okay. You can see Blood. They're outside of the top 20. NEU's down in like 21, 22 down here. This was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, I guess. And I could put them lower, but who's going ahead? Everything is messy down here, as we've established. Our loss to CSU was because we had two subs. Okay. Where's your win? Where's your win? I'm totally ready to excuse a double sub loss if you have a win over ASU. I'd even be willing to excuse it if you had a win over Cumberland. Where we are. CSULB lost to University of Las Vegas in some competition also? Correct. And that's why this is the pit and messy and tradey, and I'm not super interested in down in the middle of the pit like, oh, we had subs, oh, this, etc. I'm pretty much at the end of my leash with Illinois Orange on internet issues, roster issues, this, haven't played a match that we could actually judge them on for like 3/4 of a year. I'm pretty much on the end of my leash with them and like, oh, I'm gonna care about a team this deep in the pit saying, oh, well, we had subs that day. And okay, they'd be higher if I knew that they didn't have subs, maybe, but like, come on, guys, come on. I know a lot of Overwatch. I might be the most knowledgeable person about collegiate Overwatch in the teams. I probably am, but I'm not going to, for 100 different teams, go track them down and ask them, did you guys have a sub this day? Did you guys have bad internet? Like, come on, come on. And I appreciate you telling me. That's not to say I don't want you to tell me. I appreciate you filling me in here. I'm just saying I'm not moving you off that. Why did most of ASU go looking for team for a recent stage of OWCS? My guess, I'm not giving you inside sources here, my guess is because it looks like Angelic went and played on a team that he probably thought would be more successful with it than ASU. That team was successful. It was Ramatra Punch, the derpy team. And so ASU then wasn't going to have Angelic, their main support, so they all went looking for team, and then what ended up happening was Tanuki Tapiri, a second Tanuki team there. That was ASU minus Angelic plus a few other players. Temporal, we should be above Northwood. When we lost, we didn't eat lunch and we're hungry. Oh, let me get right on that, Ajax. I'll put you guys right ahead of Northwood because, you guys had a tummy ache. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. uh, okay. And they're playing together and face it again now. Right. They actually had a funny post where I think Angelic didn't do any damage on Brig and they still won against a team, and not a like total nothing burger team either, a playoff team from the previous season of Expert that had a pretty deep playoff run. So, but they messed up. ASU messed up their last season in Expert. They went out in like top 12 or something in their playoff run, and that's on them. And you could tell there were some things that they needed to fix. I mean, their roster quality has them up here, and their roster quality should have had them as a king of Expert, potentially a low to mid master division team, much like they made it to OWCS group stage as a I don't even think they were bottom of their group. I think Tanuki was in their group too, so I think they got third place in their group. But anyway. Okay, so we're going to look over here because I've let chat distract me enough. We're going to look over here and I'm going to make a lot of enemies by calling out the frauds. I'm kidding. They're not necessarily frauds. They're just unproven. And the first one I would look at here would be the only 9-1 I would look at here would be Bellevue, who we already pulled up. Bellevue's a collegiate team. They're in that core somewhere. I don't think they're towards the top of that core, though that could be wrong. They have scrimmed more this semester. They do have many of their players, even on other teams, playing together more as a group of like 2 or 3 players than they would have in the past, and that's going to give them better synergy. But as you look in here for the quality win, there's just not a quality win here. That's not Northwood. That's not ASU. They lost to Converse. I know they then fixed that with a later win over St. Clair, was it? I'll double check. They beat Texas A&M. Maybe Texas A&M is great, but Texas A&M hasn't been like some fantastic team last semester, and they don't have any quality wins either. So, okay, this probably should have been an 8-2 team, not a 9-1 team. That's fine. No big deal. We know that Bellevue's a quality team. Bobcats, they got their St. Clair win. 9-1 probably deserved there. Maryville, we don't even have to click in. We know Maryville. Maryville deserves to be an 8-2 team. Maryville probably should have been a 9-1 team. They would have had to catch both of these to get into trouble, and did. ISU obviously was 10-0. So then we get to Fisher Navy, which is going to be our first question mark. That's Fisher 2. In previous seasons, Fisher's second team has been good enough to really belong in the sort of middle of the core collegiate. At times, they've even been like top 8 with their second roster. That doesn't seem to have been the case this semester. And if we look at their wins, okay, hey, that's playing Northwood, getting a map off them. Maybe that matters. Northwood trolls a lot. Northwood might not have a non-troll setting right now, but they got a DQ win over Converse University. Converse University forfeited their last 2 matches with their main team. That doesn't work out. CSULB Gold, that's not worth anything to me. Briarcliff, that's not worth enough for an 8-2. That would be plenty to get a 7-3 finish. Redbirds Academy, again, beating that team would be plenty to be like, yep, you deserve a 7-3 finish. We don't see anything in here that goes, oh yeah, this team beat a good team to a core collegiate team or like a rear guard team or very close to rear guard team to get an 8-2. So this is kind of an unproven 8-2 that we're looking at here. We can continue on. No, Tedwig, you can't. We can continue on. Fisher Navy, UCI, Rutgers, we know those. ASU, yep, that makes sense. Fisher White. So now we're down to Fisher's third team, got 11th place in Swiss with the tiebreakers, and is again 8-2. How did they pull that off? How did Fisher's third team... they beat Briarcliff, and again, if they got 7-3 off that, no problem. They beat Ball State, and maybe that's proven now because Ball State beat Siena Heights and Siena Heights beat Mizzou. Maybe that's proven now. But then they lost to Mizzou. Losing to Mizzou, again, a week ago, we would have said perfectly respectable and still respectable, but probably not 8-2 worthy. Probably not 8-2 worthy based off what we're seeing there. At least based on how previous semesters have worked. Again, clearly more teams signed up and it got a little funky. St. Clair earned. Cumberland earned. They didn't beat anyone in the core to do it, but I don't think any of us are going to have questions about Cumberland at this point. Siena Heights, not earned in this, did get the win over Mizzou over in CCC quals, so maybe you're good with it. But again, win over Utah. Okay, that's something. Win over Grandview, that's something. Maybe the win over Utah is enough to make us feel like, yeah, 8-2 earned here. But usually you would expect a little bit heavier of an opponent for an 8-2 scoreline. Maybe I'm being too hard. Utah does have a reasonably high place. In the rankings, it's just my sort of cutoff is down to 14 teams right now. So in terms of the core collegiate and above sitting there. Texas A&M, Texas A&M, again, perfectly reasonable if this team was 7-3. Win over Terps, totally good enough to get you a 7-3 finish. Win over Pizza Pirates might be as well, but I don't see a real win here. So 8-2, 8-2 is pushing it a little bit. Usually we don't see 8-2s with that is the best win. Interesting stat for Cumberland is all but two wins were teams that ended top 32. Nerd stat. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so Cumberland found a difficult bracket path, and that gave them good tiebreaker points, I guess. That works out. CSULB Gold is going to sort of have a real win, but their win is over Illinois Orange. Illinois Orange is on my watch list of like, please guys, play a match against a core team and win so you can prove you're real. But they won it with major network issues for the entire team over at Illinois Orange there. So we will give that a little bit of a requires further consideration. If this win was real and it was against Illinois Orange 6 months ago, no question, totally earned. But I have a little bit of trouble believing that when CSULB lost to Fisher Navy down here. Lost to ASU, totally fine. Lost to Fisher Navy, I'm less convinced. Again, 7-3 totally would have been fine for what we're seeing here. Ball State Red, 8-2. Again, they got the win over Siena Heights that probably qualifies them, and you say, okay, they didn't do that here. Here, they lost to Fisher White, so Fisher 3 there, and lost to UTD. And we've already been over the UTD and Santa Cruz and Bronco Blacks and Texas A&M and all that sort of, we're getting, moderately deep into the pit at that point. So less convinced on this too, though, again, the CC win probably makes that, hey, no problem, they can have an 8-2, I suppose. Even that's messy because Siena Heights has sort of been like, okay, well, what's that? Or I suppose Siena Heights proof is Mizzou, when Mizzou is, okay, now multiple, what are you going to do sort of thing. Blend deserved UCSD. UCSD in the old world would have been like, oh, UCSD decided to turn it on again because, again, they can win against top 8 teams. They can lose against top 32 teams. In the old world, that's not really who they are. They haven't shown anything as high as top 8 or top 12 or anything in the last semester, really in the last year, I want to say. Lost to UTD here. Lost to Maryville is nothing, of course, but we're looking for a good win. Grand Canyon? No. We got nothing. We're down to what? ISU's third team? That's I don't even know if that's the same ISU, but that's not going to work for me. That's not going to do it. This doesn't deserve an 8-2, at least in the world that we're used to. And then again, things got messed up a bit. Converse double forfeiting at the end. Fisher taking 2 forfeits. It being a weird tradey meta caused teams to not be as consistent as they usually are, which changes how tiebreakers flow out through teams and what teams people end to get up against, because teams, even in the pit, are defending themselves against lower pit challengers less successfully than they would have in previous seasons in different metas. Redbird Railgun is third ISU team. Okay, glad we got it. And then Fisher Esports, these had 2 forfeits, so I'm not worried about that. So that just leaves Grandview as the last 8-2 team that is maybe a little bit of a question mark. And is it a question mark? Well, we're going to look at this. Win over North Texas, lost to Siena Heights. Bronco Black, who we sort of talked about down in that messy trade area, lost to Cleary. This doesn't look like it to me too. To me either. So, I think Grandview's days of being the rear guard are sort of gone. As we look at this and get just the 8-2 teams and just the 8-2 teams that are maybe a question on our screen, we will sort of check off the, hey, maybe we'd have liked to see a little bit more proof for this, or this is less proof than we're used to. And that would be Fisher White. I'm going to let Cumberland be. I think I'm going to grab Siena Heights. I'm definitely grabbing Texas A&M. I'm grabbing CSULB. I'll leave you for now, Ball State, even though in this you didn't get it, and you have a weird UCSD, UC Santa Cruz, and Grandview. That's a lot of 8-2 teams that you'd have said no question to being 7-3, but hey, where is your core win that it usually sort of takes to get to 8-2? It usually is like usually to get 8-2, you have to sort of do what ASU did and beat a Rutgers sort of thing, or do what Brian Stratton did and they got 9-1 and beat a St. Clair sort of thing. But hey, that's where we are. If you guys want to yell at me about, hey, I'm being too hard on them, or no, these teams are all absolutely proven, or whatever, that's of course what chat is for. Um, have you seen the win loss of each team when Tamu played them? Oh, did Tamu have the weird spot in the bracket? I think I heard about that, where like they constantly were the rounding error, where they were against a team with a different record than them constantly, or something. Grandview is next up? Could be. I mean, Grandview has been next up in the past. They just didn't actually make it. Part of it is, you know, even they had a semester where they were clearly the rear guard, and then they took the next semester less seriously. Maybe it was grades, maybe it was something, I don't know. And now Woods has been poached away and is over at Alvernia, and they seem to have like it looks like Woods was building for them, a roster he could go do quite competitive with, but then got pulled away to the next job, and so they have half of like a constructed ideal, this is who they want roster. And you can see teams did that. Like, for example, Brian Stratton clearly did that, where they had a couple good players and they went and got a couple more good players and they built the team that they wanted, sort of thing. And it looks like that was happening, but they got interrupted by coach poaching, which is great to see. We like that. That makes money go up. Anyway, some buggy thing with DQs. Probably. We've had a very buggy one where like Georgia Tech's second or third team had like 4 forfeit wins at one point, so it was those weren't counting as wins one semester, so they were playing 0-4 teams or something. But that was a problem because then that destroys your tiebreakers. It wasn't actually counting as your wins, etc. They sort of fixed it, but you couldn't actually fully retroactively fix it in the middle of the tournament. So those are the 8-2 questions. I'm really generally not going to have 7-3 questions. A, there's too many teams for us to go through and do the same exercise. But B, the 7-3 teams, the bar for being 7-3 is less high, quite frankly. So that's what we're looking at there. And then we can just look at the bracket, I suppose. So we have our bracket here. We're going to talk about it. Reminder, if anyone on the committee wants to hop in, talk about their power rankings, yell at me why I'm wrong for mine, you guys can do that. I'm in the Okra committee voice. Otherwise, chat's here, chat with you guys, you got it. So looking at our bracket here, let's do some obvious completions. ISU will, of course, win that. Georgia Tech should win that. And then we will have ISU, unfortunately, win that one. Sorry, Georgia Tech. I'm ready to see the ISU upset. That would be great. That would be the dark horse story of all time. Probably CSULB Gold. Ball State, you have to pick after this. Pittsburgh supposedly had some losses where they didn't have players available, and their roster quality suggests their results should be better than they were. But I'm going with Ball State, and I'm going with Ball State through. UCI, of course, wins this. UCI is going to win through. I would go with Pizza Pirates, but this isn't a strong preference. UCLA Overwatch could be similar to you right now. I don't really know that I believe Pizza Pirates is as dialed in this semester as they seem to have been the last 2 semesters. This is not Real Northwood. This is their second team. Rutgers wins and Rutgers qualifies. Texas, UTD should make it through, but UTD has some interesting wins and losses. So I'd expect them to get to the round of 32, but maybe they don't. That's not A&M's main team. Bellevue easily wins there. And then that's not Converse's main team. It will be interesting to see North Texas versus Converse Gold. That I'd be interested to see. I would favor Converse University Gold there, but hey, we could see what happens. And then Bellevue would get through there. Cumberland should have a clean run through here with Slugs, Santa Cruz running in there. Bobcats is going to go to here. Northeastern is going to go to here. And then in my heart of hearts, Northeastern is going to go here. But in my realist, rational mind, we're going to have the, okay, fine. You guys have a good roster. St. Clair versus this. We look at this, and St. Clair gets through there, no question. And now we're going to scroll down and get sort of our second half here. I've got Grandview over Penn State. I know we were just hearing in chat about how Penn State's really great, belongs on the list. Penn State, again, had an old world top 16, but we're talking like 4 years ago at this point, and I need to see some more evidence before I'm ready to put them back in my tracked teams list. Making it to top 64 is not going to be enough to get back on my tracked or semi-tracked teams list. You got to get a win I care about. You got to make it through to the actual bracket stage, to the, double elimination bracket. Do something to make me pay a little bit of attention. St. Clair wins through. Winthrop, I don't even need to see who's here, is going to win through. Oh, that's interesting. That's a good match there. If I have to pick a winner there, I think on my tier list I've got them right next to each other. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I'm gonna go with Washington and follow my tier list here, but that might be the most interesting round of 64 match right there. Texas A&M versus Alvernia. That could be another interesting one, but I would go with Texas A&M there. That would, by all means, tell me why that's not true. And then Blinn wins over SCAD. SCAD is sort of back in the scene, but they don't really seem back in the scene. For those that don't know, SCAD was a definitive top 8 team 3-4 years ago. They had foreign contenders players for both of their tanks and both of their DPS. This would have been Overwatch 1 era, and then they just had some, pretty good tier 3 pickups, at least for one of their DPS slots, a very good tier 3 pickup. And fine for the other slot there, but that team did not handle the transition to Overwatch 2 and even disappeared for a semester or even a year after that transition. So they're back and they're like more in it now, but I don't think they're 100% in it. If they are, by all means, show me otherwise. That's not what I've seen out of you guys so far, but hey, that's interesting. So I would look at this, and of course, Blinn qualifies through. They still have most EU contenders players. They do. They have Cabimas. They have Snape. They have one more there. I think they lost one of their players, but at this point it's looking a little washed. Yes, they have EU contenders, and they might have a South American contenders player too, but at this point those are old EU South America contenders players, and it's just not cutting it anymore. The scene levels up over time. But really, those guys are not playing to the standard that they did 3 or 4 years ago. Like they're not playing at the standard that they were there, and that's not purely from the scene's gone more competitive standpoint. Potential, but not drive. I don't know that drive is going to come back, but we'll see. Fisher Navy versus IW Titans. Navy with the recent win over Mizzou. Have to put them through here. Illinois Orange versus Terps. I'm picking Illinois Orange, though this is an interesting one to watch, not because it should be super close, but because Illinois Orange against some reasonably qualified resistance. This will not count as the win that Illinois desperately needs over a core team to stay in that core collegiate section, but it'll prove, hey, you guys are there, you have a pulse, this is a top 32 team, even if they're going to get eliminated in the round of 64 that you're up against, and what are you going to do here, sort of thing. And then, if things go according to the script, Illinois should win. I'm not sure I actually believe that. I might be looking at this. I know I'm betraying my own power rankings, but that's what I'm putting. This can be the fire to motivate Illinois Orange. Maybe you guys are going to scrim a couple more times. I'm ready to see it. Then we go here, ASU wins, and I'm going to put ASU to win through. I think Converse, even though they have good wins this semester, I think it's just been a rough semester for them. So I do put ASU there. I have ASU in a tier above Converse anyway. That's not to say that those tiers don't trade. Those tiers do trade wins. But I would expect ASU to ultimately take that. Northwood gets this for free. I mean, I guess St. Thomas gets through, but St. Thomas hasn't really proven that they're interesting this semester. I put Siena Heights ahead of Redbirds Academy, and then we've got San Diego and Ohio Scarlet. Really depends on the day for San Diego. Too much of an up and down team, but obviously the winner of this, Siena Heights and Redbirds Academy, should then make it through. And I have that as Siena Heights. And then Maryville will, of course, make it all the way through here. And this becomes interesting now. Utah versus Mizzou. What do you want to do with that? Utah versus Mizzou. So that should have been Mizzou. That should have been Mizzou's in a tier above them, but that's not true anymore. Those teams get pretty close to each other when you put the power rankings here. Those are only 2 spots away. I think I have to believe that Mizzou's going to solve whatever's going on there and get through. But this is a team that almost everyone believes is top 20. Roster is too good for the results they're getting right now. Gonna go out before the before the double elimination bracket. So this would be another good one to watch. I don't think it will be as close as this one here, but this would certainly be another good one to watch and probably a little bit higher level of a game that we're looking at, while still being close and interesting. And then we've just got one last double bracket here, which is going to be Fisher White should win through, and then Fisher Esports is going to crush their third team and go through. So that's my bracket prediction. Did I get anything wrong? Are you guys looking at this and saying, no, Temporal, you're wrong on XYZ reason? You're taking BCU? Okay. Okay. I'm good for it. I'm totally good for Briarcliff beating UW there. I could easily see that going both ways. I have, obviously direct scrim warm up experience with both of those teams, and I could very much see that going either way. Uh, okay. You're wrong. You forgot the legit RC factor. Ah, yes, the legit RC factor. The legit RC factor actually says Texas State University wins it all. New homecoming champion. No. Do I see anything else in chat? We're probably approaching the end here. We've done the bracket. We've talked about maybe the outlier teams that have a record that maybe you wouldn't have expected to be quite that good. I don't think we need to go over the round 9 and 10 matchups, and we've been at this for a little over an hour now, which is a little bit longer than most of these go, just a little. So I think we're probably wrapping up. If you have something that you feel I missed in chat, or you feel, hey, this is important, yell at me I'm wrong, say, wait, what about this topic? Tell me I missed a crucial matchup where Texas A&M beat, I don't know, Fisher Navy, something like that. Let's get that in here right in now so I can catch that in the final couple minutes here. I'm going to scratch a chat scroll. Boise super checked out. Yeah, that's probably true. Boise State hype. Okay. Who dropped out of NACE but did at least play in those because of their in-person rule. Um, and that's ISU Academy. Are you guys not in person? Does ISU have a lot of remote stuff going on? I wouldn't have thought of that as a highly remote school. Was the in-person rule a problem for you guys? And I'm happy to hear that you do believe you've figured out your tank and DPS rotation, because I think I knew what your tank and DPS, or at least what your DPS rotation should look like, and you guys then seemed to continue to experiment, and is part of why I'm being tough on you guys. Uh huh. Okay. Fisher White seems somewhat legit, but yeah, Shu Win seems really recent. Some more weight. Exactly. Exactly. Mm hmm. Okay. Cool. Final check in on chat. One person, but our arena access is only the general gaming, so it's not really ideal for match days. Yeah, you're in a general pool with the other gamers. I get it. All of us don't like playing at our facility and prefer our home setups. I get a little impartial on that one. The reason I get a little impartial on that one, um, the reason I get a little sort of not impartial, but hesitant, resistant, whatever you want to call it on that one is I have mixed feelings about esports and sort of the okay, well, I don't like it when teams release reschedule policies that basically say we'll never reschedule, but we can point at an official policy and say, oh, it's not our fault. That's nonsense. But at the same time, if esports does want to take the next step, having less matches moving around and more this is fixed is probably important. Having, hey, these are arenas and like in practice is sort of in-person practice and in-person matches aren't really optional is sort of probably a reasonable step somewhere along that line as well. Like it's a little more it's not casual. It's not casual. Everyone pours tons of hours into this. It's not casual. But I'm going to say it's a little too casual to be like, oh, well, we'll move this match and we'll move this match. And, oh, well, these two people are in person at the arena, but these three people are at their home computers and haven't been into, the match room for stuff. Like, and I know that's how a lot of teams operate. And there is something of like and maybe that's just like a boomerism. Well, back in my day, you had to do this and yes and that, but I feel like there's probably something there in terms of, hey, it's a varsity sport and it's more and more a varsity sport. I know a lot of teams competing, especially in homecoming or clubs, but like it's gotten traction as a varsity sport and it is Collegiate is where competitive Overwatch survived from the great owl recession and continues to survive because, let's face it, OWCS is that happening for sure next semester? Face it, is that really like even Master Division? Not all the best teams are signed up. That seems to have maybe not been a complete success. Like, okay, if this is it, there's a certain level of seriousness that doesn't have to be there right now, but I would like it to continue to take step by step. And that's going to get the pile on, and that's going to be like when Kyle commented on prize money and got piled on, and I get it. I get it. But I'll be the boomer today. How's that? It's not a. Oh, sorry, Kyle. I say that, and then it's not a boomer thing. More professionalism needs to be brought to the space. Exactly. Exactly. I understand, but we're still only a club team at the end of the day. The school doesn't really demand anything of us. Half of our roster plays for fun. Fully agree, though, on the professionalism aspect. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, you were part of that, Ajax. Okay. Yeah. So you did get dogpiled on. I'm not sure that was okay. Uh, Ajax, what are your prizeful opinions? Okay, before Hedwig actively stirs up this drama that I maybe just threw under the pit there, I get where you're coming from, Chombo. You are a club team, but again, we would get into schools having here's your varsity team, here's your A team, and sort of those things are included in it. Like here's your varsity team and your JV team, and your JV is sort of part of it. That's less a collegiate thing. That's more high school, but we do get a bit into that because let's face it, your club teams are your farm if you're at a big school or if you're at a school that's not directly recruiting the players that it wants the way some schools do. If you ever win a trophy, I've won multiple trophies. What are you talking about? Build shelves behind you and display them. I have multiple trophies. Plans never open. That's because I don't want you to see my freaking license plate. My car is parked right behind me, and I don't want to dox myself. Okay, that's going to do it. We've had fun here, and I'm gonna go ahead and call it a day. Final vision of the power rankings right here. I'll probably post a screenshot. Maybe I'll post it to Twitter. Who knows? But that's going to do it. You guys have been great, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Tim.